This time to inform you that this morning, based on the advice of the experts in the British Columbia Fire Service, we have declared a provincial state of emergency regarding the fires that are currently ongoing in British Columbia. This decision has been made on the basis of advice that we have received in terms of the number of fires, the nature of the fires, as well as the long-term outlook over the next 10 days in terms of the weather, and the fact that there does not appear to be any relief in sight. This state of emergency will last for 14 days, and it can be renewed, and it can also be rescinded. It will allow the province to do increased coordination in terms of resources. It will, for example, allow the fire commissioner to determine if municipal resources are needed to engage in fighting an interface fire, that to take place. It will allow the RCMP to determine if members from other detachments need to be used in evacuation and controlling the flow of evacuation and or entering and accessing particular regions in British Columbia. It will allow that. It will give substantial powers to the province to be able to ensure that everything that needs to be done is in fact being done. There are some significant differences between the fire situation last year and this year. This year what we're dealing with is fires all over the province of British Columbia, whereas last year they were tended to be concentrated in a number of areas, the Caribou, for example. The fires this year are not of the same size in terms of the fires that we saw last year, which were very much interface fires near urban communities. The decisions in terms of going to a provincial state of emergency are based on the advice of the BC Fire Service, the experts who actually fight the fires and know what's happening, and in many cases have more than 30+ years in fighting fires in this province. And it's on their advice that these decisions are made. And it's not based on a political decision, but it's based on the advice that I receive as minister. They're the ones who have been fighting the fires, 3,400 men and women on the ground. They have said it is time now to go to a provincial state of emergency. That's our advice, and it's on that basis that that decision gets made.
So there was no discussion for days ago about the state of emergency.
We are constantly monitoring what is taking place in terms of fires and how they're being managed, and what's happening in terms of weather, the direction of what's happening with the fires. That's constantly being evaluated, and we are always prepared to have to move when the advice is to move. That's why we have already been in discussion with the federal government, for example, some time before we made the official request for additional help from the federal government. And so this is an ongoing day-by-day, often hour-by-hour process, and the decision is made on the advice of the experts in the BC Fire Service.
The government has been saying that we'll be deploying firefighters to the area as needed in terms of resources. So has there been any time in the last 2 or 3 days that there hasn't been enough people that you're going to look at some of these areas, particularly in the Chaco and Farnworth? When
we talk to the BC Fire Service, who tell us what they need in resources, they have told us that we are getting the resources that we need. We, as I said, have been in contact with the federal government when it became clear that we want additional support from the federal government. They responded very quickly. We have been in discussions with them, identifying the resources that we would be needing. At the same time, we also coordinate the need for resources through the Canadian International Fire Centre, which is based in Winnipeg. And so they work with all the provinces in determining what's required and ensuring those resources are getting here. We have reciprocal agreements with other jurisdictions, New Zealand, for example, Australia, and Mexico, as well as other provinces. Those firefighters have been here now for quite some time. We started the planning and, in fact, the preparations well ahead of where we normally do in a normal year. And so those resources are there. They are allocated as to where they're needed. Those decisions are made by the professionals in the BC Fire Service.
Which region
Those are operational decisions that are made by the fire service, and it can change from day to day. So we saw over the weekend, for example, that we had rain in parts of the Caribou. That helped. At the same time, we know that there are significant challenges faced in northern British Columbia and north central British Columbia, and so resources are deployed to where they're needed, and those decisions are made by the fire service. And obviously the key priorities are the protection of public safety and property, and that's how these decisions are made. Sorry? Okay. Yeah. We asked the federal government for three things. One was for an additional 200 what are referred to as self-contained units, so that's through the Canadian Armed Forces, to be able to go and deal with the hotspots and the fire guards where they're needed. The second request of the federal government was for additional heavy lifting aircraft, and also to identify additional aircraft that may be required in terms of evacuating people from remote and smaller communities. Discussions had been taking place with the federal government for some time, and so when we made the request, they approved that. Those things are on their way and should be on the ground. My understanding is that they already are. Those are operational decisions that are made by the fire service on a day-to-day basis. The state of emergency is not required to access resources from the federal government. If we need to have additional resources, the federal government has always indicated that they are standing with us and ready to provide whatever assistance we need. But right now, we have what we have asked for. The federal government has supplied.
We've been in a state of emergency before.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
There have been,
my understanding is there have been 4 province-wide states of emergency, 1996, 2003, last year, and this year. Last year was the longest in the province's history. It lasted for some 10 weeks. This is the first one that has been declared this year, and as I said, they last for 14 days, and then they can be renewed, or they can be rescinded at any time. Climate change clearly is an impact. We know that it is changing. We know that the fire season is starting earlier, and each year is different. The bulk of the fires that what we have seen this year have been lightning caused, and they have been all over different parts of the province. And of course, you know, that you have absolutely no control over. Fires that are caused by humans, obviously, yes, you know, it's a constant battle to remind people when they're out in the backcountry, when they're out in the bush, that they've got to, you know, follow the fire bans, that they've got to listen to the evacuation alerts and evacuation orders, and not to chuck their cigarette butts out the window. At the same time, after every fire season, there's always a review done in terms of, you know, what were the challenges that were faced, how were they met, and what else do we need to do? So all of those things are in fact taking place.
Last year there were concerns by some of the stations. Are you satisfied with how communication has gone?
There has been a significant improvement in terms of communication. That was one of the lessons from last year. In fact, First Nations and industry have been brought into the planning stages in terms of emergency preparedness and dealing with the fires at a much earlier stage than has been done in the past. Why is there? Okay, yeah, okay, cool. Oh, hey, how you doing? Harps. Yeah, harps, sorry. Yeah.